The year is 1916. In the grand halls of the Russian Winter Palace, chandeliers flicker, shadows dance across marble floors, and unease spreads like smoke. Whispers echo from behind velvet curtains, whispers of a man with wild, penetrating eyes, a man who walked out of the frozen Siberian wilderness and into the heart of the Romanov dynasty. His name was Grigori Rasputin, and no one knew quite what he was. Some believed he was a holy prophet, a man sent by God to heal, to guide, to warn. Others were convinced he was a devil in disguise, a hypnotic manipulator who seduced noble women, drank like a demon, and wrapped Russia's royal family around his filthy fingers. But everyone agreed on one thing: he was impossible to ignore. They said his eyes could paralyze, that he could command pain to leave a child's body with a whisper, that bullets, poison, and knives could not kill him. They called him the Mad Monk, a peasant, a prophet, a fraud, a phantom. And when the powerful finally decided to destroy him, they learned just how right those rumors were. Because Rasputin didn't die like ordinary men. His end was straight out of a nightmare, poisoned, shot, beaten, drowned, and yet still breathing. How did this dirty mystic come to control the Tsarina of Russia? Why did the Tsar ignore every warning about him? And most haunting of all, what did Rasputin know that no one else did? His presence split the empire. His secrets walked behind closed palace doors. His murder was meant to save a nation, but it came too late. Tonight, Tales Beyond Time takes you into the heart of the story so strange, so dark, so unbelievable, it could only be true. This is the legend of the man who refused to die. This is the curse of Rasputin. Stay with us. History is about to whisper something chilling. Before the scandals, before the royal court and whispered prophecies, before the bullets, poison, and frozen river, there was just a barefoot boy in a forgotten Siberian village. Born in 1869 in the bleak hamlet of Pokrovskoy, Grigori Yefimovich Rasputin entered a world of mud roads, wooden crosses, and endless winter. His family were peasants illiterate, poor, devout. They worked the land, prayed to the saints, and feared the dark. There were no books, no doctors, no luxuries, only survival. But even as a child, Grigori was different. He spoke little, but watched everything. His stare wild and unblinking made grown men uncomfortable. Villagers whispered of odd behaviors, sudden visions, and strange healings. Animals calmed at his touch. He seemed to know things a peasant boy shouldn't know. At age 10, he fell deathly ill. A fever raged for weeks. When he finally recovered, something had changed. He claimed to see the Virgin Mary, angels, demons. He spoke of sins he hadn't committed and futures that hadn't happened. Many feared him. A few followed him. And then he disappeared. Rasputin left his wife, his children, and his village. He wandered barefoot across the Russian wilderness for years, living off the charity of strangers. He visited monasteries, shrines, and holy men, seeking purpose and purity, but also power. He was drawn to strange sects, especially the Klisti, a secretive group that believed sin brought you closer to God and that suffering cleansed the soul. Their rituals were shocking. Ecstatic dances, public confession, even self-flagellation, and sexual acts framed as spiritual release. Whether Rasputin fully joined them is unclear, but their influence on him was undeniable. He emerged from this wandering a changed man-bearded, intense, magnetic. He called himself a starets, or holy man. But unlike the quiet monks of tradition, Rasputin didn't preach restraint. He drank, he danced, he groped and blessed in the same breath. He claimed that to rise above sin, one had to first be consumed by it, and somehow it worked. By the early 1900s, Rasputin was gathering followers across rural Russia. People lined up to touch his robe, to hear his visions. He spoke in riddles. He healed with his hands. He made women weep and men fall to their knees. His fame spread like wildfire from village to provincial towns, and finally to the heart of the empire, St. Petersburg. There, the elite were in spiritual crisis. The Russian Orthodox Church felt stale. The monarchy trembled on the edge of revolution. The rich sought mystics, seers, and healers to soothe their restless souls. And then they heard of the ragged monk from Siberia with piercing eyes and miraculous hands. Rasputin was invited into drawing rooms, salons, and finally, into the orbit of the Romanovs themselves. But the moment that would change his life and the fate of an empire came in 1905, when Tsarina Alexandra summoned him to the royal palace. Her son, the heir to the throne, was bleeding. The doctors could do nothing. The Tsarina was desperate, and so Rasputin came. The year was 1905. The Russian Empire stood immense and trembling. Revolution boiled in the streets. The royal family hid behind palace gates, fragile and hunted. And within those gilded walls, a secret bled slowly and silently. The Romanovs carried a deadly inheritance. Their only son and heir, Alexei Nikolaevich, was born with hemophilia, a rare and deadly condition that prevents blood from clotting. A simple fall could lead to internal bleeding. A bump on the knee might mean death. And this boy, this fragile child, was the future of Russia. The Tsarina, Alexandra Fyodorovna, was crushed beneath the weight of it. She believed Alexei's illness was divine punishment, perhaps for marrying a man unfit to rule, or for her own foreign blood as a German-born princess. Doctors came. Treatments failed. The Tsarina prayed, pleaded, wept. And then someone whispered a name, Rasputin. They said he was no ordinary priest. He could heal with touch. His prayers worked when medicine failed. His eyes could see into the soul. And most of all, he was said to have power over pain and blood. Alexandra, desperate beyond reason, summoned him to the imperial residence. When Rasputin arrived, he looked like a man who didn't belong. Wild beard, tattered clothes, a stare that unsettled even seasoned generals. The court was horrified, but Alexandra, she saw something else. Hope. She led him to the boy's bedside. Alexei was writhing in pain, bleeding internally, moaning softly, his face pale. The court physicians stood by helpless. Rasputin sat beside the boy, placed a hand on his forehead, and prayed. He whispered for hours. No medicine, no ritual, only words in stillness. And then the bleeding stopped. The next morning, the boy was calm, breathing, sleeping, healed. To the Tsarina, this wasn't coincidence. It was a miracle, a divine intervention, a message from God. Rasputin had done what no one else could. He saved her son. From that moment forward, Alexandra was utterly devoted. She called Rasputin our friend and the man of God. She believed he was sent to protect the throne through her child. And her husband, Tsar Nicholas II, though skeptical, trusted her judgment. But there was something more dangerous and healing at work here, faith without question. Rasputin had unlocked something in Alexandra that no one else could, relief from unbearable fear. He became her closest advisor sometimes, appearing in the palace uninvited, sending letters from afar warning of danger, dictating who should be hired or dismissed. She defended him fiercely, even when ministers and bishops protested. The whispers began to spread. Who was this peasant monk who now influenced the Tsar and Tsarina? What did he know, and how far would he go? The court grew nervous, the nobility grew furious, and the people, already restless from war and famine, now had a new villain in their imagination, a mad monk controlling the crown. But Alexandra didn't care. As long as Rasputin could keep her son alive, she would defend him to the bitter end. And Rasputin? He knew exactly what kind of power he held. By the time Rasputin had solidified his role as spiritual healer to the Tsarina, the line between divine mysticism and raw manipulation was no longer visible. He had become more than a priest, more than a friend, more than a man. To some, Rasputin was now the voice of God at court. To others, he was a drunken devil whose grip on the Romanovs would doom them all. The stories started quietly. A chambermaid here, a noblewoman there, strange tales of secret meetings behind closed doors, of whispered blessings that turned into touches, of spiritual cleansing that demanded physical submission. Rasputin, the monk who claimed purity could only be achieved by embracing sin, did not just preach temptation, he indulged in it openly. In public, Rasputin wore the same filthy robes he had always worn. His beard was unkempt, his fingernails blackened, and his stare unsettling. But behind closed doors, he was a seducer. He frequented lavish salons and underground clubs, often in the company of aristocratic women duchesses, wives of ministers, even royalty. He would grab them roughly by the arm and whisper to them about their souls and their sins. Many resisted. Some did not. Eyewitnesses described his unholy charm, how his gaze could both terrify and enthrall. He would predict their deaths, read their thoughts, and then slowly pull them into his confidence. One woman later confessed, "I went to him for prayer and left his room with shame. And yet I returned the next night." Rasputin often claimed that sleeping with him brought women closer to God. He was not just offering pleasure, he was offering salvation through sin. Perhaps the most salacious rumor of all was the one the Russian elite most feared, that Rasputin had seduced the Tsarina herself. Letters between Alexandra and Rasputin were filled with strange language. "My dear, dear friend, light of my life, my only hope," phrases unbefitting of a married empress and a lowly monk. While historians debate whether their relationship was ever physical, the perception alone was toxic. Enemies of the crown used it as fuel, painting the Tsarina as a manipulated fool, or worse, a willing participant in the debasement of the throne. Postcards appeared in the streets showing caricatures of Rasputin and Alexandra in compromising positions. Soldiers at the front whispered that their empress was under the spell of a Siberian devil. Even allies of the Tsar begged him to intervene. Nicholas did nothing. To him, Rasputin had healed his son. To Alexandra, Rasputin was sacred. But to the people, Rasputin was the rot spreading inside Russia's soul. Rasputin's sins weren't just rumors. They were scenes witnessed in taverns and brothels across the capital. He would drink himself into oblivion, shouting prophecies and cursing the aristocracy. He often bragged about his power over the royal family, how he could whisper a word to the Tsarina and have any official removed. On more than one occasion, Rasputin was seen staggering through the streets with prostitutes on each arm, laughing, singing hymns, and shouting to onlookers that he was God's chosen one. He mocked priests who condemned him and laughed at ministers who tried to bring him down. Even high-ranking bishops feared excommunicating him, unsure if his power came from something darker than heaven. Yet every time scandal erupted, Rasputin emerged untouched. Why? Because no matter how outrageous his behavior, he still held the one thing no one else did, the ability to calm Alexei's deadly illness. He was untouchable, and he knew it. As the First World War escalated and soldiers starved in the trenches, the Russian people grew restless. The empire was crumbling, and all fingers pointed to Rasputin. To many, he symbolized everything wrong with the monarchy: corruption, decay, spiritual blindness, and betrayal. Cartoons depicted him as the puppet master behind the throne, with strings wrapped around the necks of Nicholas and Alexandra. Pamphlets accused him of being a German spy, a Satanist, a murderer. Priests, generals, and politicians all begged the Tsar to cut Rasputin loose. Still, nothing. And the whispers became roars. Nobles began to meet in secret chambers, plotting not only his removal, but his death. For them, it wasn't just politics anymore. It was survival. Rasputin had become a poison in the blood of the empire, and they were preparing an antidote. It began, as many strange chapters in Rasputin's life did, with a woman and a whisper. By 1914, Rasputin's name was no longer spoken in hushed tones. It was shouted in the streets. Nobles, priests, generals, and commoners alike feared the man who claimed to speak to God, yet wandered into brothels reeking of wine. But while many plotted in secret, one woman chose to act. Her name was Kyonia Guseva, a former follower of another radical religious leader, defrocked and imprisoned for heresy. Guseva had only one arm, no nose, and a face twisted by disease and fanaticism. She claimed to be pure and devoted to the true word of God, and she believed Rasputin was the devil in disguise. On the morning of July 12, 1914, in the town of Pokrovskoye, Rasputin's own birthplace, he stepped outside for a simple stroll. It was peaceful, quiet, familiar. Then, without warning, Guseva appeared from the crowd. With a scream of "You defiler of the holy," she lunged forward, drawing a knife from her cloak, and plunged it deep into his abdomen, nearly disemboweling him. Rasputin collapsed, blood gushing onto the dirt road. His intestines spilled into his hands. He was rushed to a hospital, barely alive. For days, it was touch and go. Rumors swirled across Russia. Rasputin is dead. Some celebrated, others panicked. But then, miraculously, he recovered. And with his return came a chilling transformation. Rasputin claimed that during his brush with death, he had a vision not of angels, but of chaos. He said he saw the Romanovs in chains, Russia burning, and the snow running red with blood. His voice, once jovial and theatrical, became darker. His eyes, already infamous, now seemed to pierce through bone. Then he delivered a prophecy. "If I am killed by common men, the Tsar shall endure. But if I am murdered by nobles, the dynasty shall fall. Not a single one of your children will survive." Those closest to Rasputin begged him to flee the capital, to hide, to return to his rural roots. But Rasputin refused. He was more than a man now. He believed he was part of divine will, God's wrath in flesh. And in a bitter twist of fate, his prophecy would prove hauntingly accurate. Less than 2 years after Rasputin's eventual death, at the hands of nobles, the Tsar would abdicate. The Romanovs would be imprisoned, and the entire family, father, mother, daughters, and the boy Rasputin once saved, would be executed in a dark cellar by Bolshevik soldiers. Was it fate? Madness? Or did Rasputin truly see what was coming? What if his death wasn't the victory his killers had hoped for, but the final curse that sealed the empire's doom? On a freezing night in December 1916, a group of Russian nobles lured Grigori Rasputin to the Moika Palace. They fed him wine and pastries laced with enough cyanide to kill a man twice. Rasputin ate, drank, and laughed. When the poison failed, Prince Felix Yusupov panicked, pulled a revolver, and shot him in the chest. Rasputin collapsed. But minutes later, he rose, eyes blazing, blood pouring. He attacked his would-be killers and fled into the snow. More bullets followed. One to the head finally brought him down. They wrapped his body in a carpet and threw it into the frozen Neva River. When it was recovered, his lungs were filled with water. He hadn't died from poison or bullets. He drowned. Rasputin died, fighting, but he had warned them. If I am killed by nobles, the Tsar and all his family will be dead within 2 years. And he was right. Just months after his death, revolution exploded. Protesters stormed the streets. Soldiers mutinied. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated. The Romanovs were arrested, imprisoned, and finally moved to a cold, bleak house in Ekaterinburg. On the night of July 17, 1918, the entire royal family was led into a basement and executed. Bullets bounced off the daughters, at first, their corsets sewn with jewels. But the guns fired again and again, until silence. The empire was gone, but Rasputin remained. He became myth, monster, mirror. Some saw a madman who corrupted an empire. Others believed he was a prophet martyred by the elite. No one could agree who he truly was. And maybe that's the point. Rasputin wasn't just a man. He was a reflection of everything broken in Russia's soul. He didn't kill the Romanovs, but he showed the world how fragile they were, how blind faith, fear, and power can destroy even the mightiest throne. More than a century later, his story still haunts us not because he lived, but because of what we let him become. A warning, a riddle, a ghost in history's mirror. And if we stare long enough into that mirror, we might just see ourselves. Rasputin is gone. His body lies buried, but his shadow still lingers. He came from the frozen dirt of Siberia and walked straight into the heart of the Romanov court. He healed the air, seduced the Tsarena's trust, defied poison, bullets, and knives. And when the powerful finally destroyed him, his prophecy unfolded like a curse. Within 2 years, the throne crumbled, and the entire royal family was executed. But perhaps Rasputin wasn't the monster they feared. Perhaps he was only the mirror they refused to face. His life was a riddle, part mystic, part manipulator. But his legacy? That's the part that haunts us. Because Rasputin isn't just a figure of the past. He's a warning. A reminder of what happens when blind faith replaces reason, when fear empowers a single voice, and when truth becomes too dangerous to hear. And maybe that's why his story still echoes today. If this tale made you question, wonder, or see history in a new light, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Tales Beyond Time for more forgotten legends, forbidden truths, and the dark corners of history they didn't teach you in school. Comment below. Was Rasputin a prophet, a parasite, or a pawn of fate? Because history doesn't sleep. It waits in silence watching. And when the moment's right, it returns. Rasputin did. And next time, it might not come back as a man,